Welcome into Locked On Knicks. Who are the Knicks Untouchables this offseason that they can't move no matter what? We're answering that and more in this offseason mailbag.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome in to Locked On Knicks. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. And I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Knicks first listen today and every day, whether you're checking us out on your favorite podcast platform or taking in the sights and sounds on YouTube. We appreciate you making us a part of your daily routine. Make sure you hit that notification bell to never miss an episode on YouTube or the auto download function on your favorite podcast app. We're still here for you guys more or less 5 days a week, even during the off season. So we got you covered on Knicks content. We got a bunch of good stuff this week, starting with this mailbag, ending maybe with some draft coverage, maybe some philosophical debates. Who knows? There's a lot of stuff to get into. I'm Alex Wolf. I'm editor-in-chief of Knicks site, The Strickland, which you can find at thestrick.land. He's Gavin Shaw, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster, And Gavin, we had some great mailbag questions come in, although I'll, as always, make sure to promote the fact that, if you are listening to this and you want to still ask a question, you definitely can. You can hit us up on Twitter. You can either just reply to the tweet we put out yesterday, or you can just directly ask it to us at Locked On Knicks. We also put out a post on the YouTube community tab. I don't think we got any questions off that going into today, but if you want to put it in there or just put in YouTube comments, we'll happily answer questions all off season long. It's a long off season, so we could definitely get to every single one of them at some point or another. But the first one that we're going to get to is from Adrian Chatham at MagicAge683 on Twitter, who wants to know, with the upcoming signings and possible re-signings happening, which current Knicks would you consider untouchable, and which ones would you be willing to part with if it meant keeping our winning core intact? And Gavin, I thought this was a good first question because it sort of piggybacks on our luxury tax discussion that we had yesterday about the Knicks maybe having to make some tough decisions soon. How do you feel about this one?
First of all, shout out to Adrian. Now and always met him during a showing of The Batman. Great movie, great time. Just happened to be sitting next to him. Cool dude. All right, let's group this. So I think there are four categories here. I think you could put guys in untouchable. If you held a water gun to my head, would be the next one. And then the other guys are guys I'd part with. And then maybe the fourth one, which I'm actually not sure if there's anyone. It's so funny. This would have been the whole team in the past. Now I'm not sure if there's one guy who would fall into this fourth category. The fourth category is probably like, please take him. So how about this? I have the Knicks roster pulled up on ESPN. What if we just go through each guy in order and just run through it? So I'll just throw a name at you. Precious Achiuwa. Which of those four, if you want to just stick with the two categories, would you put him in?
I've got Precious in the if you make me category. I would definitely prefer not to lose Precious, but based off what we were talking about yesterday with how close the Knicks are going to be to that second apron potentially, I mean, even re-signing him for $10 million might kind of screw them a bit. So yeah, I'm kind of in that category, but I don't know where you fall there, but I love what he brought to the floor this year. I thought he was a great auxiliary player and ultimately someone worth keeping on the team just because he showed like when you needed him, he could step up, whether it was in the regular season or the playoffs. So I would definitely prefer to keep him if I could.
Yeah, I think I'm somewhere. He's stuck in like a nebulous zone for me between if you make me and partable, just because I thought his playoffs were really disappointing. Like he had the one great game against the Pacers, which was game 4. He was incredible that game. I mean, like super switchable, the rim protection. And he also, game 4. He loves game 4s for some reason. Game 4 against Philly too. He was fantastic defensively. That was a game where Anunoby was guarding Embiid, but Precious was flying around off ball and had 4 or 5 blocks. Game 4 against the Pacers, he was just like ridiculously switchable. Like Nemhard, who well, now the series is over, but was in the midst of just torching the Boston Celtics. He was switching onto him, blocking him. He was like dunking on offense. He was like making like short shots. He was getting offensive rebounds. Like he was sort of the version of the guy we saw in the regular season. I think I ultimately fall into If You Make Me, just because given like if the Knicks are going to stick with the Mitchell Robinson, Isaiah Hardenstein combination at center, it like he is an incredibly strong third string center. And I think just right now, like maybe Jericho Sims is a higher floor, and that Jericho Sims will kind of consistently be like a 4 out of 10, 5 out of 10, which in a third, fourth string center is great. Precious is higher highs, so would be nice to keep him. He's a luxury. I was disappointed in his playoff performance. That being said, I think consistently playing him at the 5 instead of the 4 would obviously do wonders for him. And that's sort of contingent on what the Knicks do going forward. And if they are inclined to give up on Mitchell Robinson, then maybe they go that direction. All right, next guy up. We got a big name next. It is OG Anunoby. Where do you fall on OG Anunoby, Alex?
Untouchable, period. I mean, you gave up 2 of your best young players for him, and like, yeah, no, he's untouchable. They have to re-sign him. That's it. Yeah, there's no other answer to me.
Yeah, I think you're right. At the end of the day, I mean, we saw the Knicks played at what, like I did the math earlier in the summer. It was like a 68-win pace or so, including playoff games with OG Anunoby. Net rating when he's on the floor is pretty much Celtics-esque. Like they played like not only like one of the best teams in the league, they played like one of the best teams in recent memory with OG on the floor. And obviously the bulk of those minutes ended up coming without Julius Randle, or at least half those minutes ended up coming without Julius Randle. So the potential of what this team could be, I still think nationally, like I saw, if you want to get riled up, Kevin O'Connor referred to the Knicks in his like column today as a playoff pretender, ignoring all the injuries and stuff. Like the Knicks were like a title contender this year. Like that is more clear than ever with how shaky the Celtics have looked against subpar competition, with Denver going down in the second round. Like I'm not coming on here and saying like the Knicks were the favorite. I don't think that. But I think they had a puncher's chance. And I think that is sort of the reality of the NBA now. And I think Anunoby, we could get into the specific reasons why in a future episode, but with everything he brings to the table defensively and as a shooter. And we saw, like, ironically, in the game he got hurt, like his ceiling as an offensive player, which, like, if he's aggressive and like put into a corner where it's like, all right, OG, like we're looking at you, you're sort of the one other guy on the floor here who's making money outside of Jaylen. Like he can create shots, he can be efficient. I think there's still upside there. The injuries are a major concern. You might be making I'm forgetting the deal, but like or the phrase, like a little bit of a deal with the devil with him, where like you're just hoping for the 1 year he's not hurt in the playoffs, and that does spook me a little bit. But at the end of the day, he's too good. He's untouchable. All right.
Yeah,
next guy here is Bojan. We're getting a lot of good ones up front on the ESPN roster. What do you think about Bojan?
I'm saying partible. I mean, the short take is just, it just comes down to money. Like, I think ultimately he might just be used as a trade chip this offseason anyway, with that $19 million salary. But if the Knicks are looking at things going into the offseason, and, you know, his guarantee date, I think, is 2 days before free agency starts for that $19 million, and they can opt to just cut him for $2 million and just have that count against their cap next year, make him a free agent. I think they're just going to take an assessment and be like, okay, if we're going to have to pay too much into the luxury tax this year, we don't want to become like a second apron team overnight. You know, keeping him is too much of a luxury. We don't have a trade lined up right away. You know, so we're not going to do it. I liked what he was bringing to the floor a lot, especially towards the end of the year. So it'd be a tough decision to me, I think, to go ahead and do that. But yeah, I think ultimately I would be pretty surprised if he starts the season next year with the Knicks. Like, I feel like they're either going to just make him a cap casualty at the end of the season, or they're going to like very swiftly look to trade him as part of a package for a bigger player early in the offseason so that they can get that done and then sign all the extensions and then probably enter the luxury tax right there.
Yeah, I'm somewhere in between. I probably ultimately fall in partible, but I honestly, a part of me leans towards If You Make Me, just because I'm still so intrigued by the idea of seeing him and OG Anunoby on the floor for big minutes. I think they played about a single game's worth of minutes together. And Anunoby, like he lets you keep Bogey on the floor, and most importantly, he lets Tibbs be comfortable having Bogey on the floor. And we saw once he got going in the second half of the year, like he's a game changer offensively. The Knicks simply don't have another shooter that's in the same category as him other than Dante. Like he's pretty unique on this roster, and the fact that he can do that while playing the 4 is absurd, and why he was fairly highly coveted when the Knicks went out and got him. And he has like an off the dribble game, and he's a pretty good passer. Like I really, really like the skill set, and the Knicks just don't have another guy like that. And I think especially like when Mitchell Robinson's healthy, like and you're playing 48 minutes of him and Hartenstein at center, the Knicks are gonna have so much insulation defensively. Like you're gonna be able to afford to put that guy out there with 20 points per game, and he is definitely a luxury piece. But you know what luxury pieces do on great teams in the NBA? They're the difference between winning close games and having blowouts on a lot of nights of the regular season. So it would be great to have that guy. I'm with you. I don't know how realistic it is to keep him. And I think if they do keep him, it is probably with the intention of moving off that contract before the trade deadline. Next up on this list, Jaylen Brunson. Alex, we got to build some drama. Do we want to trade Jaylen Brunson this offseason? Maybe the answer is obvious to some, maybe not so much to others. We're going to talk about it next on Locked On Knicks.
But first, we got to remind you this episode is brought to you by our good friends at FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel's giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. And, there's NBA-wise not quite as much to look at the moment, considering we've got one series that just ended, another one that's on the cusp of possibly ending tonight, both in sweeps. I'm sure this is not what the NBA had envisioned for their conference finals. But you know what? Against all odds, I'm going to take Minnesota +2 anyway at a -14. I think, or even just money line +106 tonight. I don't know. I think with their backs against the wall, they got to win at least one. There can't be 2 sweeps in the conference finals. That's disgusting. So just for the sake of basketball, I hope that Minnesota wins this game, and maybe you should too. You could put your $5 bet on that, or perhaps take a little more of a sure thing. Maybe do like Anthony Edwards to score 20 or more points. That might be a little more of a sure thing. Anyway, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, we're back in, and Gavin, you floated right before the break like there was some suspense. Jaylen Brunson's untouchable. Let's move to the next player. I don't think there's any case you could. I mean, do you want to try to make a devil's advocate case that you could trade him?
No, you can't. You can't trade him.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't have the ESPN roster in front of me, but I'm just going to go to Julius Randle real quick. We may as well just go from big name to big name. That's a little more intriguing. I would put him. If we could, I don't know. I know there's very easy definable categories here. I guess I would put him under if you make me, but like the strongest possible if you make me. Basically the only way that I'm moving Randle this offseason is if the Knicks get the chance to add someone who's like MVP caliber. It would basically be like Giannis or something like that. Like if you can get a Giannis for Julius Randle, you have to, because that raises your ceiling so much. Like he just does everything that Randle does, but better, even if he comes with a little more of a health risk in recent years. But he does everything better than what Randle does, other than maybe the 3-point shooting, but he makes up for it by being like one of the most dominant post presences ever. So yeah, I think Randle is if you make me, but like the highest possible degree, where it's only if I'm getting like another high quality all-star back.
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit of a softer if you make me, where I am open to the idea of moving off Julius Randle for a player who's a better fit and who's not a better player. And the example that I would go to right away is Mikal Bridges. And I think maybe some particularly plucky Nets fans would make the argument. And Mikal is maybe like at times has been more consistent, certainly has a better playoff track record than Julius, is undeniably a far, far, far better defensive player. But in terms of just like throwing the ball and getting buckets, like Julius is in a different category. And there was a point when Bridges was initially traded for the Nets, like he looked like he was going to go through similar transformation. Like he does not have Julius's track record as a scorer. And I think that is going to be, it's something I brought up on this podcast as early as like March. We did an episode with XJ on it, but I think it's a fascinating debate whether the Knicks would be better off with someone at that 4 spot who's a higher level shooter, a higher level defender, and you give up some shot creation in that exchange. Because we got a long runway of that with Randle out, and we saw it took Jaylen Brunson's game to another level. And I wonder if you lose some of like that MVP level Brunson with Randle back, and the counterpoint would be like, all right, but that is just too much work for him, and he's going to break down if you ask him to do that consistently. I think it's a fascinating argument. It's not one for today, but because of that, I make Randle a if you make me, because I do think there are trades on the table where I'm like, it's painful. It sucks. This guy's been incredibly loyal. He had a heartbreaking ending to his career in New York. I really don't want it to finish up this way, but I will do it because I think it gives the Knicks a better shot of winning a championship. All right. Up next on my list, I'm gonna say we're both gonna put Charlie Brown Jr. in Partible. Next rotation guy is Alec Burks. Did Alec Burks do enough to redeem the good Alex name in the playoffs, Alex?
I think I would put him in Partible just because it all just comes down to money, but Partible, but with a strong inclination towards like, if you want to sign for basically the minimum, you've got a spot on the bench, because I think that he proved enough in the playoffs that I'd feel good just having him be there with no expectation of playing time, but an understanding that, hey, maybe you will get some, if it's deemed necessary, if we have an injury, if, whatever, like you're the 11th or whatever man, and you'll get a chance, but, only if there's some calamity on the team. And maybe that's cool with him. Maybe it's not. I don't know. But if he's willing to take like $3 million a year to do it for like 2-3 years, and it's not like the final piece that pushes the Knicks into a tax bracket or something, then yeah, sure, I'm with it. But otherwise, I wouldn't shed tears over it.
Yeah, I don't really have that much to add. Other than the fact that he was incredible in the playoffs, and I went from being like, get this dude off my you know what team, to being like, kind of cool to have him back. He's sick. And I just like watching him play basketball. There are very few guys who like, I don't know exactly what he's hitting. Maybe it's like that Hooper's Hooper mentality, but it's very similar to Jamal Crawford, where it's just smooth, it's aesthetic, and I'm like, I could just watch this guy hoop all day when he's at his best, not the regular season version he got. That guy makes me want to throw up a little. All right, another tough one between the top 2 categories, probably Dante DiVincenzo. What are your thoughts on him?
I border between untouchable and if you make me. I mean, honestly, I think I might just, not even just for the fact that like, I think that Hart and DiVincenzo are functionally untouchable because of the bond with Brunson and the fact that it's Brunson's team and everything else. Like, I mean, I do know that like ultimately they got rid of Ryan Arcidiacono, but that's a different category. Like, otherwise it seems like they're very integral to what the Knicks are looking to do, but they also proved themselves in the playoffs. Like DiVincenzo, I think, shook his rep as a guy who fades in the playoffs and rose to the occasion a number of times. He wasn't perfect, but he was good. Josh Hart certainly, so maybe we could just do them both together real quick. Sure. But like, I mean, he certainly proved something in the playoffs too. I think I lean towards untouchable for both. For Dante, especially because it's like his contract is too good. Like, if you're including him in a trade, I mean, he was one of the best 3-point shooters in the entire NBA last year for like $10 million. I mean, it's like such a crazy, crazy bargain at this point that I don't think you can move him. I think you got to hold on to him at this point. Yeah, it's especially impressive the amount of threes he made, how high he finished in the season standings. When you consider like the first quarter of the season, he was playing like 10 minutes a game, which is why he was not eligible for most improved player apparently. But like, yeah, I don't know. I would give it to him. I would give him the untouchable tag, just based off that. And Hart, I think I also lean untouchable just because even though he's a little more fairly paid to what his production is, I think he's just, I mean, pun intended, the heart and soul of the team. I think you got to keep him at this point. I mean, just for Brunson's sake and for the team's sake, he did so well this year.
Yeah, I think It's tough, right? Because like when you push untouchable to the fullest definition of the word, which is like, all right, would you turn down right now? And maybe I think there are a lot of Knicks fans who would, and maybe have fair arguments to like Jaylen Brunson for Luka or Jaylen Brunson for Wembanyama. Like that's where like you start sweating a little bit, right? And I am obviously not pushed that far with Dante or Josh Hart, where it's like, all right, like to your, like you threw Giannis out there earlier. Like if one of them was the difference between getting Giannis and not getting Giannis. But I almost feel like that is perverting untouchable a little bit. And I think I am gonna put them in that category as well, because I think the way we are going about it is like more so an extreme version of like, if you make me. Like I'm looking at untouchable and like any deal that could be considered relatively equal, you're probably not moving off them. And I think at the end of the day, I'd probably separate them. I'd probably put Hart closer to the untouchable, and Dante to the highest end of if you make me. And that's almost not a reflection of them in players, but that Hart, to your point, like just feels so essential to this team's identity. And Dante, if you were trading for a shooter of a similar caliber, like could theoretically be replaced. And like there are, for like, even like, let's just say you were trading Dante for Bridges somehow. Like it was Dante plus a bunch of picks for Mikal Bridges. Like I think while Bridges is obviously not quite the shooter Dante is, he brings some of that while also just being a much better defender and having much more ability as a creator. So that's the kind of trade I could see myself like being talked into. I just think Hart's motor is too important. So if I'm really separating by the finest of threads, that's where I'd go. But I'm fine with them being untouchable. All right. Someone who's like a little bit closer to home, because this is coming up right now. Isaiah Hartenstein. What do you think about him?
I will let everybody know my thoughts on that in just a moment. When we get back in, we'll talk Hartenstein, Mitchell Robinson, and more in our next segment. All right, we're back in, and Gavin, you posed the question: Isaiah Hartenstein, untouchable, or only if you make me, or partable. I'm kind of going untouchable at this point. I just think the Knicks should be prioritizing keeping him as the center. I mean, the only way that I would consider him not untouchable is if you have the opportunity to get a better option at center, that's going to be more of like a star center. And there's only one of those that could potentially be available, and he is never allowed to play for my basketball team, and that's Joel Embiid. And I don't even think that they're going to try to move him. I think that the Sixers are going to try to heavily reload around him this offseason now. From all indications, they're hiring a new coach, or they're not hiring a new coach. They're keeping their same coach, but like bringing in a ton of new players, have like a ton of new cap space that they're going to be looking to use on someone, maybe even try to pry OG Anunoby from the Knicks. Like there's a lot going on there. So I don't think that Joel Embiid is going to be one of the guys available. And other than that, there's like, what are you gonna just hold out for like Jokic or something? Like, I think you just re-sign Isaiah Hartenstein. He fits so well with this team. He passes well. He defends the way you want. He rebounds the way you want. I think he's untouchable, just in the sense of, I mean, I would do everything to try to re-sign him. There might be something out of the Knicks' control in this case, which is some team coming and offering more money and Hartenstein prioritizing that. Because the Knicks are capped at how much they could offer him. But if you have the opportunity, I think you re-sign him and you keep him for the long haul.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. I think he just made himself invaluable in a way. Like we could do Mitch as the other end of this question, because I think he, like, I would have been stunned to hear myself say this at the beginning of the season, where I was calling Mitch the Knicks' best player maybe, but he just, like, Mitch has a higher ceiling in two areas, right? As a rim protector and as a rebounder. And Isaiah's never going to be that, though he's one of the elite rim protectors in basketball, even if he's not quite on Mitch's, or maybe I shouldn't even say rim protection. Maybe I should just say as an overall defender, just because Mitch is stronger, he's a little bit longer, and like he still gives you a tiny bit more verticality at the rim. But Hartenstein, like, is an elite rim protector. He is a solid enough switch defender, and he had really good moments in the playoffs as a switch defender when the Knicks were forced into that. He doesn't have that one-on-one capability to guard someone like Joel Embiid that Mitchell Robinson does. He's not the generational offensive rebounder that Mitchell Robinson is, but he is a top 10 offensive rebounder in basketball, and then he brings you everything else, right? Like automatic on that little flip shot, a little bit more spacing offensively, like one of the best passing bigs in the NBA who would like get recognized maybe even as like a borderline generational passing big, if not for someone like Nikola Jokic, who just blows everyone else out of the water. The Knicks were just so good when he played. I think in due time, maybe like the initial press conferences next year, I think we're going to find out that like that Achilles was still bothering him as the playoffs went on. And I do think it's important that the Knicks have another center to just stop him from playing too many minutes, because we did see some wear and tear once Mitch went down, but he's incredible. I'd love to have him back. Mitch, on the other hand, is a if you make me. I think at the end of the day, Alex, just because he is exceptionally injury prone, or maybe that's unfair and overstating it, because he was healthier the year before, but he's quite injury prone at this point in his career, and there are just very real weaknesses in his game. And when he's on the floor, you have to deal with the lack of spacing. You have to deal with the fact that teams are going to foul him in important moments, and those actually mostly made his free throws in important moments. Like there just are trade-offs there to Mitchell Robinson, and there are trade-offs to every player, but they're just much smaller and much less noticeable with Isaiah Hartenstein than they are with Mitch.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I don't have much to add to that. I think it just comes down to, can you afford to spend $30 million on your center position in today's NBA? And, I do think that having one as the contingency for the other is a great thing. You just mentioned, like, if Hartenstein gets hurt, like, you want to have a good backup. Well, you could have the best backup in Mitchell Robinson. And then, if Mitch is hurt, then, the Hartenstein can step in. And then hopefully you have someone that can float around like Precious that can pick up the slack if one of those guys is hurt and, play the remaining few minutes. But yeah, ultimately he makes like $13 million roughly for the next 2 years. And I hate that everything's coming down to dollars and cents now, but unfortunately, like, as we went over in yesterday's episode, which, like, if you haven't watched, definitely go back and watch. But, the dollars and cents are going to have more of an effect on the team building now, unfortunately, because the NBA is making it really punitive to have a very expensive roster now. And that's going to mean that some of these guys you don't necessarily want to see go are going to have to go at some point, just to avoid hitting all those tax lines and all that stuff. Before we get into our last like major rotation player, I think we can safely say Daquan Jeffries, Jacob Toppin, Shake Milton, Mamadi Diakite, Dwayne Washington, etc. And even Jericho Sims, I think, unfortunately, are all, I would say, partable. Maybe bring them back. They certainly weren't bad on the end of the bench, but I don't think anyone's shedding any tears if none of those guys come back, because maybe some people have some strong opinions about Sims, but he was fine. I think the Knicks hopefully can use one of their draft picks this year to get someone slightly better than Sims for that third, fourth center spot. So the last big name is Deuce McBride. Before we get on to our last couple questions, and Deuce, I'm putting similar to Randle at the, or well, you had Randle and If You Make Me, or we both had Randle and If You Make Me, but I had him at the highest. You had him in sort of the middle. Again, I'm putting Deuce in the If You Make Me category, but at the highest possible point, because his contract is just such a good value at this point. It's like they just signed him to a second rookie deal. And I know that he still has his limitations. He's still more or less like a two guard trapped in a one's body. But he plays defense so well. He proved at certain times in the playoffs that the shot can fall in the playoffs and he could be a playoff contributor, which was honestly a struggle for some of the other young guys that were on the Knicks. Like, for as much as we loved Quickly and Grimes and RJ, all of them had their struggles in the playoffs at various times. Deuce is finally the one that like showed up and was like, just played a role and made some shots and hit and played defense and influenced games in a big way. So I think that I'm on the highest possible version of If You Make Me. And that's only if like you're looking to trade for like, Donovan Mitchell, I guess. And it's like, hey, we'll do this for like Bojan Bogdanovic and like Mitchell Robinson, but like you need to throw in at least one young player. So you're going to have to give us Deuce McBride. And then hopefully you can bring over Rokas Jokibitis to make up for the fact that you're trading him and all that stuff. But yeah, I think that's the only scenario where I'm looking to move Deuce at this point. Otherwise, I want him on this team, period. Like he influences things in such a positive way and he's on such a valuable contract.
Yeah, I the contract is extraordinary, and I think everything I'm about to say I needs to be under the context that he is grossly underpaid and he should probably fire his agent. But I was higher. I'm currently higher than I ever thought I'd be on his offense. Let me start off with that. Like the shot making, the poise in big moments against the Sixers, like that is just like if you look at an NBA careers, like in levels, like in like level 1 to level 10, and level 10 is like just in terms of responsibilities, like is like Luka Doncic, like you're being asked to do literally every single thing for your team. I thought Deuce was going to play like a level 2 role on this team, and he ended up in the playoffs playing like a level 7 role, essentially a level 8 role, where it's like make big shots in big moments off the ball, like guard the second best player on the other team. Like that is an extraordinary amount of responsibility for a guy making $4 million a year. And for the most part, he was awesome in doing it. So that is valued to the nth degree. And that I'm with you. That is like the highest level of if you make me. I'm also going to say maybe there's someone who can dive deeper in like in a player grade thing. I was a tiny bit disappointed in his defense in the playoffs, not so much in the regular season, and that he was really good. But I think I always saw him as someone like this is an all defensive player who's just maybe never going to be a good enough offensive player to justify the amount of minutes. And despite your point that he is a 2 guard in a 1's body, like he's becoming a good enough offensive player to justify pretty big minutes on a good team. If he was like that, like top 20 defender in the league. And I think he's really good, not great on defense. So that is my only qualm with him, if you want to call it that. It's not really, it's sort of more of a picking nit. And maybe like, I think if he was legitimately that type of defender on his contract, you would have to put him in like the lower tier, Josh Hart, Dante DiVincenzo level of untouchable. But I think that is the only thing stopping me from getting there.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. I have him right on the cusp of that. So I think we're kind of in agreement. Like you do whatever you can to keep him, but if you have to move him, it's heartbreaking. All right, and we got 2 final questions to end on here. First one comes from our buddy Urim Lakaj at Lakaj. What are the chances we have 5 Nova guys at the start of the season? Gavin, we were talking about this before the show. The obvious 4th one here is Mikal Bridges.
Jason Frazier. Oh, yeah, Mikal Bridges. Yep.
Yeah. So who's number 5?
I was a big Scotty Reynolds guy back in the day, so we could say him. What are the chances 5? I think he's asking if they bring Arcidiacono back at the end.
I guess so. Yeah, that's the most logical.
I think
or like
would be
Kyle
nice.
Lowry, maybe.
Yeah, I mean they do need a backup point guard. And it would be nice, like Kyle, like just watching Kyle Lowry in that Sixers team. It's one of those things where you hate him and you're like, man, it'd be kind of nice to have that guy on our team. Like if he's the same guy he was last year, like that is a solid 12, 15 minute a game, hang out with the boys backup point guard. So I'm honestly pretty good with either version of that.
Yeah. What if you were setting the chances at like a percentage chance or an out of 10, let's just say an out of 10, what would you say? Chances it's 5 Nova guys on the team next year.
I'm going to say, well, I guess I don't know. Assuming Arcidiacono is a free agent, I probably should have looked.
He is. Yeah.
He is. Okay.
Yeah.
I'll put it at 60%. I don't see, it seems like he would want to be in New York, and the Knicks were kind of forced to part with him. And unless there's like a guy at the end of the roster that like is a 2-way and like they're really high on, like, I don't know. I'll call it 60%. What about you?
I'm going to go 40% just because I'm not totally sure about the Bridges aspect of it, to be honest.
I forgot about Bridges. I'm going to call it 25. I'm 15%.
Okay, there we go.
I forgot about. I just assumed Bridges was on the team. I'm like, yeah, they just need one more.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's why I'm like, I'll put it at 40%. I guess I don't know. I'll buy the hype that they're gonna look to try to get him, just because it makes too much sense from a cap perspective and a fit perspective and everything else. But if they get him, I think it's almost 100%. I feel like they'll bring Arcidiacono back because they really liked him. Like I think they actually were really sad to part with him, not just for the friendship aspect, but like. He was calling stuff out. Like he was like famously yelling out 5-second violations and stuff like that. Like you like guys that do crap like that on your bench. So I think they'll look to bring him back. Then our final question here comes from Victor Miguel at Victor_Miguel_B on Twitter, who wants to know, what is our Knicks ceiling if no moves are made this offseason? I don't I don't think that. I mean, maybe this is something that we could explore. I think this is something we'll explore as a full episode at some point. But uh, my quick take on this is just they could be a dark horse finals team. I think that's it. I mean, I just think they played well enough when they were fully healthy with Randle and Anunoby in January. They were 14-2 in the month of January, and it was one of the best months in like team history. It's no coincidence. It was a very well balanced, good team, and they were playing good teams and not just squeaking out wins against good teams. They were destroying good teams. Like they annihilated the Nuggets, they annihilated the Sixers. I mean, they were doing some really good stuff during that month. Like I think you can make a case they could potentially be in finals winning team if they make no moves, if things break the right way. But I wouldn't fault them for trying to make a final move to get even better and make that more of a possibility. But, I think this year proved. I mean, they did it with no Julius Randle, no Mitchell Robinson for a good part of it, no Bojan Bogdanovic for a good part of it, no OG Anunoby for a good part of it, and they still went to 7 in the conference semifinals. So, as a fully healthy team, I think sky's the limit.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think it's a championship. I've said this stat before, but in January, they had the highest net rating of any team in basketball has had in any month this year. The Celtics had 2 different months that tied it. It was like plus 15.6 per 100 possessions, but that says what it says. The Knicks played as good of a month of basketball as any team in the NBA did this year, like period. And that, to me, screams championship contender. Are there extenuating circumstances? Like do we have a shred of evidence that Julius Randle translates to the playoffs in a meaningful way? Like we just don't yet. And that is the issue here. That is the downside. The upside is like we know pretty much everyone else on this team and pretty much everything else that made this team good does translate in a real way to the playoffs. And sometimes like with guys like Deuce McBride, like better than you could have ever hoped or expected. So I think it is a dark horse ceiling, but I think it is a championship ceiling. On that happy note, sometimes I say that sarcastically. This time I really mean it. We will wrap up this episode of Locked On Knicks. He's Alex. I'm Gavin. Next time you talk to us, Alex is going to be talking some draft. We are really excited to get into our draft coverage. We hope you are too. So we'll see you soon on Locked On Knicks.